The eighth process of the build, acquire and implement domain, called manage knowledge, has 5 practices. The second practice is to identify and classify the sources of information. The entities that are responsible include the business process owners, the chief information officer, and several IT heads. The entity that is held accountable is the business executives. The practice receives one input, which is the knowledge requirements and sources from external sources. It generates one output, which is the classification of information sources to be used internally. The activities involved in this practice include identifying the potential knowledge users, including the information owners. The knowledge requirements and sources of information should be obtained from the identified users. Several types of information should be considered, such as documents, records, policies, processes, emails, facts, classifications, and concepts. The sources of information should be classified based on a content classification scheme. Information sources should be validated based on information-specified criteria such as relevance, importance, confidentiality, and accuracy. The third practice is to organize information into knowledge. The entities that are responsible are the head of IT development, the head of IT operations, and the head of IT administration. The entity that is held accountable is the Chief Information Officer. The practice receives 2 inputs, which are the documented solution components from the BAI3 process, and the knowledge transfer plans from the BAI5 process. It generates one output, which is the published knowledge repositories, to be used by the BAI07 process. The activities involved in this practice include matching sources of information based on shared attributes, and creating relationships between information sets. The stakeholder requirements should be taken into consideration when creating the views of the information sets. Unstructured knowledge, such as expert knowledge, should be managed through a scheme. The knowledge should be published and shared with the relevant stakeholders. The fourth practice is to use and share knowledge. The entities that are responsible are the audit and compliance function, the Chief Information Officer, and the head of IT administration. The entity that is held accountable is the business process owners. The practice receives 3 inputs, which are the documented solution components from the BAI3 process, the operation and use plan from the BAI5 process, and the knowledge transfer plans also from the BAI5 process. It generates 2 outputs, which are the knowledge user database to be used internally, and the knowledge awareness and training schemes to be used by the BAI07 process. The activities involved in this practice include identifying the potential knowledge users, and transferring the relevant knowledge to them based on a needs analysis. The users should be trained and educated on the available knowledge, and how to access it. The fifth and last practice is to evaluate and retire information. The entities that are held responsible are the Chief Information Officer, the Privacy Officer, and most IT heads and managers. The entity that is held accountable is the business process owners. The practice receives no inputs, but it generates 2 outputs, which are the knowledge use evaluation results, and the rules for knowledge retirement, both to be used internally. The activities involved in this practice include measuring and evaluating the usefulness and value of the knowledge, and identifying if the information is still relevant to the enterprise's knowledge requirements. The rules for knowledge retirement should be defined. Other sources that provide further inputs into this process include the IDLE framework.